producers and consumers are still taking that too far. That any hint of reduction, any hint of animalistic tone is just dismissed as Brett and fault.
I'll give you a very good example. We make a little bit of Shiraz from Port Phillip. And in 2006 we made a wine which was a bit reductive, and I had people complain. If you drink that wine now, it's superb. It's drinking
which
fantastic.
is the difference between Brett and reduction. Brett doesn't go away.
Reduction can go away. It doesn't have to.
Doesn't always work.
Brett doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So Brett gets rid of us. Australians, I think the Australian market is the most knowledgeable wine market in the world. More knowledgeable than here, more knowledgeable than anywhere else. I see people accept Brett here all too often without realising what it is. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen in Australia, but it happens less. Having said that, I don't believe that zero Brett is perfect. I think if you can't see it, but there's a little bit there, often that wine can be slightly more complex.
Does add character, doesn't add a little bit of depth. Reduction, not Brett.
I think there's a lot of Burgundian wines which have very low level Brett, which get praised in Australia, I'm going to say, but which clearly have some low level, and they haven't suffered for it. So it shouldn't be a black and white thing, you know. It's like VA. You need some VA in wine for it to be balanced. Now, I'm not saying that you have to have Brett wine. There are plenty of good wines which are zero Brett, and Phil Sexton's wines will be zero Brett categorically, right? But it doesn't mean it's necessarily zero Brett. So I don't like to harm too much at some points like that. And I think we get all too carried away with one aspect of the wine instead of worrying about what that wine's supposed to be. So sometimes you've got to accept the imperfections.
Absolutely, that was kind of my point. I speak to Australian colleagues or New Zealand colleagues in America, not so much American, but Australia and New Zealand, and any hint of reductive smells or anything like that is dismissed as a fault of the wine. And I think they do take it too far. I mean,
I'm at the point where a simplistic wine, which has everything correct, but it's a simplistic wine, can be defined as a faulty wine, from my point of view, because I don't want to drink a simplistic wine. And when I think of a fault is something that stops me from drinking the wine. Therefore, if you give me a squeaky clean wine but a simplistic, if I don't want to drink it, that's as good as a faulty wine.
Can you agree more with that?
And I think that's something that maybe we need to concentrate more on in Australia. Because we tend to get on these bandwagons.
It's a bit too clinical, I think, sometimes.
I think it is, and I don't know how clinical Phil came across. Hopefully not too clinical.
I mean, I don't necessarily want to say this if I'm being recorded about someone who I hugely respect, but there was definitely perhaps a huge scientific background to what he was saying, but it was incredibly interesting because I don't think I'd ever heard a winemaker, and he wasn't talking about wine as a science as this is a product which I'm going to concoct and here is the chemicals I'm going to put together and look at what I can make, but he was looking at wine as a science as opposed to perhaps an art, which is, if you were going to be really general about it, I think it falls into this perhaps slightly more artistic, romantic when we think about it. But he was looking at it in a very clean, scientific sort of way, which actually was almost quite refreshing because I'd never heard sort of that spoken about, but it was right on the other side of things. So going from one extreme to the other, and it was very overwhelming. And I was sort of listening to it, thinking, I'm now a little bit lost with what you're saying, because I mean, winemaking is one of those things that I think that probably lots of us have been to wineries and we've learnt about it, but it's a lot of the terminology we're not continually sort of working with all of the time. So you can sometimes forget exactly what someone's talking about to know precisely what they're talking about when you're talking about sort of free sulfur and things like that. And it was very scientific, and I was really having to concentrate when I was listening to what he was saying. But it was still incredibly interesting.
Phil Sexton used to be a brewer, didn't he?
Yes, still is.
Yeah, so perhaps he's coming at from that angle as well.
He actually makes great